Hey guys, tonight we'll wander quietly through the winding corridors and bustling courtyards of a medieval castle. Not as a knight in shining armor or a damsel in distress, but as a curious observer, taking in the rhythms, textures, and small wonders of daily life. No need to worry about sieges or sword fights here. Just a gentle, meandering journey through the castle's many layers, with a few winks and a touch of dry humor along the way. Let's begin at dawn, as the first pale light slips through the narrow arrow slits and dances across the cold stone floors. The castle is just waking, the world outside still wrapped in mist. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows with the self-importance of someone who's never been told that not everyone appreciates a 5 a.m. wake-up call. The castle's resident cat, a dignified creature with a patchwork coat and a talent for finding the warmest spot in any room, stretches luxuriously by the dying embers of the great hall's hearth. The day starts early for most. In the kitchens, the cook and her helpers are already at work, their hands deftly kneading dough for the morning's bread and stirring great pots of pottage over the fire. The air is warm and fragrant, filled with the comforting crackle of flames and the irresistible aroma of baking loaves. If you've ever woken to the smell of fresh bread, you'll know it's the medieval equivalent of a 5-star wake-up call, minus the room service, unless you count the kitchen boy with a tray of yesterday's leftovers. Elsewhere, the castle's servants move quietly through the halls, sweeping rushes from the floors, polishing brass candlesticks, and making sure the Lord's favorite goblet is exactly where he left it. The steward, a man with a keen eye for detail and a ledger that never quite balances, checks the stores and mutters about the alarming rate at which the cheese seems to disappear. The castle mice, of course, remain silent on the matter. Upstairs, the lord and lady of the castle are beginning their day. The lord, wrapped in a heavy woolen robe, consults with his steward about the day's business. Rents to be collected, disputes to be settled, and the ever-present question of whether the moat really needs to be cleaned again. The lady, meanwhile, oversees the household, her morning spent with the head housekeeper discussing everything from the state of the linens to the best way to keep the laundry from freezing solid on the line. If you've ever tried to run a household with a to-do list that never ends, you'll find a kindred spirit here. The castle's children, if they're lucky, are still asleep, but soon enough they'll be up and about. Lessons with the tutor, a bit of Latin, a bit of arithmetic, and, if the weather is kind, a romp in the courtyard with the dogs. The tutor, a patient soul with ink-stained fingers and a fondness for riddles, does his best to keep order, though he's learned that a well-timed story about dragons is often more effective than a stern lecture on the virtues of good penmanship. As the sun climbs higher, the castle comes fully to life. The blacksmith's hammer rings out from the forge, sending up sparks as he shapes horseshoes and arrowheads. The stable boys lead the horses out to be watered, their boots squelching in the muddy yard. The castle's guards, ever vigilant, patrol the walls, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble. Or, more likely, for the arrival of the baker's cart from the village. The air is filled with the sounds of daily life, the clatter of hooves, the laughter of maids, the distant strains of a lute as the minstrel tunes up for the evening's entertainment. The great hall is the heart of the castle, a vast room with high, beamed ceilings, walls hung with faded tapestries, and a long wooden table that serves as the center of both feasting and business. Here, the Lord holds court, hearing petitions from tenants and settling disputes with a mixture of wisdom, patience, and the occasional raised eyebrow. The hall is also the scene of daily meals, where everyone from the highest noble to the humblest servant gathers to share bread, cheese, and whatever else the cook has managed to coax from the larder. The food is simple but hearty, and the company is lively, especially when the jester decides to demonstrate his latest trick, which may or may not involve a chicken and a very surprised cat. There are oddities and small mysteries everywhere you look. A spiral staircase that seems to lead nowhere, a hidden alcove behind a tapestry, a door that only opens with the right combination of patience and a well-placed kick. The castle is a place of secrets, both grand and trivial, and the servants know them all, though they're far too discreet to share, unless you happen to have a particularly good piece of gossip to trade. As midday approaches, the castle settles into a gentle rhythm. The sun streams through the high windows, casting golden patterns on the stone floors. The kitchens are busy with preparations for the main meal of the day. The great hall is swept and set, and the courtyard is alive with the comings and goings of messengers, merchants, and the occasional wandering minstrel. The air is filled with the promise of another day, full of work, laughter, and the quiet satisfaction of life within these ancient walls. And so, as the castle moves from morning into midday, we find ourselves in a world where every stone has a story, every corridor holds a secret, and the gentle routines of daily life are the true heart of the medieval castle. As midday settles over the castle, the sun stands high and bright, casting sharp shadows across the courtyard and warming the ancient stones. The air is alive with the gentle bustle of daily life. In the kitchens, the cook and her helpers are in full swing, chopping onions, stirring pots, and occasionally shooing away a particularly bold goose that has wandered in from the yard. The scent of roasting meat mingles with the earthy aroma of root vegetables and the sharper tang of herbs, rosemary, thyme, and a generous handful of parsley, because even in the Middle Ages, presentation matters. The great hall is being readied for the main meal of the day. Servants lay out trenchers, thick slices of stale bread that serve as both plate and, eventually, a snack for the dogs. Pewter mugs are polished to a dull shine, and the long table is set with bowls of pottage, platters of cheese, and baskets of apples. The lord and lady preside at the high table, their children seated nearby, while the rest of the household, knights, squires, servants, and guests, find their places according to a hierarchy that is both ancient and, to the uninitiated, slightly baffling. If you've ever tried to figure out the seating chart at a family reunion, you'll have some sympathy for the castle steward. The meal itself is a lively affair. Conversation flows as freely as the aisle, and the topics range from the latest news from the King's Court to the ongoing debate over whether the new moat is deep enough to deter invaders, or just deep enough to drown the occasional overconfident duck. The jester, never one to miss an opportunity, offers a running commentary on the proceedings, his jokes just sharp enough to keep everyone on their toes, but never so pointed as to risk a stint in the stocks. The food is simple but filling, and there's a sense of camaraderie in the shared meal. A brief pause in the day's work to enjoy the company of friends and family. After the meal, the castle settles into a quieter rhythm. The lord retires to his solar, a private chamber filled with books, maps, and the occasional half-finished letter to a distant cousin. Here, he consults with his steward and bailiff, discussing the management of the estate, the collection of rents, and the ever-present challenge of keeping the roof from leaking. The lady, meanwhile, oversees the spinning room, where women and girls gather to spin wool, weave cloth, and share stories. The air is filled with the software of spinning wheels, the gentle clack of looms, and the low hum of conversation. Part work, part social hour, and, if the gossip is particularly good, part comedy show. Elsewhere, the castle's children are released from their lessons and spill into the courtyard, their laughter echoing off the stone walls. Some practice archery under the watchful eye of the master at arms, their arrows thudding into straw targets with varying degrees of success. Others chase each other through the gardens, dodging the gardeners and occasionally trampling a prized rosebush. The dogs join in, barking and wagging their tails, while the castle cat observes from a safe distance, her expression one of mild disdain. The afternoon is a time for work and for rest. The blacksmith returns to his forge, the rhythmic clang of his hammer a steady counterpoint to the softer sounds of the castle. The stable boys muck out the stalls, their boots squelching in the straw, while the falconer tends to his birds, their sharp eyes and sleek feathers a reminder of the castle's connection to the wild world beyond its walls. In the chapel, the chaplain offers prayers for the household, his voice rising in a gentle chant that drifts through the corridors like a blessing. There are visitors, too, merchants from the nearby town, a wandering minstrel with a battered lute, and a pair of monks seeking shelter for the night. Each brings news and stories from the outside world, and the castle comes alive with the exchange of information, goods, and the occasional tall tale. The steward listens carefully, always alert for rumors of trouble or opportunity, while the cook eyes the merchant's wares, hoping for a rare spice or a particularly fine wheel of cheese. As the sun begins its slow descent, the castle prepares for the evening. The kitchens are busy once more, the great hall is swept and set, and the torches are lit along the walls, their flames flickering in the gathering dusk. The air cools, and the sounds of the day softened, a lull before the gentle bustle of supper and the quiet pleasures of the night. And so, as the afternoon drifts into evening, the castle stands as a small, self-contained world, busy, vibrant, and full of life. Every stone, every corridor, every quiet corner holds a story, and the gentle routines of daily life continue, weaving together the lives of all who call this place home. As evening settles over the castle, the world outside grows quiet and cool. The sun dips behind the distant hills, painting the sky in shades of rose and indigo, while the first stars blink awake above the battlements. The castle's stone walls, so imposing by day, now glow softly in the torchlight, their shadows stretching long across the courtyard. The air is tinged with the scent of wood smoke, roasting meat, and the faint sweetness of apples stored for winter. Inside, the great hall comes alive once more. The long tables are set for supper, and the household gathers, lords and ladies, knights and squires, servants and guests, all drawn together by the promise of warmth, food, and company. The fire crackles in the hearth, casting golden light on the faces around the table. The meal is simpler than midday's feast, but no less satisfying hearty stew, fresh bread, and a jug of all passed from hand to hand. The jester, ever the opportunist, slips in a final joke or two, earning a round of laughter and a mock glare from the steward, who's still keeping an eye on the cheese. After supper, the castle settles into a gentle rhythm. Some linger in the hall, sharing stories and songs by the fire. The minstrel plucks a soft tune on his lute, his voice weaving tales of distant lands and ancient heroes. The children, now sleepy, curl up on benches or in their mothers' laps, their eyelids drooping as the music drifts through the hall. The dogs doze by the hearth, their paws twitching in dreams of rabbits and roast bones, while the cat, ever dignified, claims the warmest spot for herself. Elsewhere, the castle's work continues, though at a slower pace. The kitchen staff tidy up, washing pots and sweeping the flagstones, their laughter echoing in the quiet. The guards make their rounds, lanterns in hand, their footsteps steady on the parapets. The blacksmith checks the forge one last time, making sure the coals are banked for the night. In the chapel, the chaplain offers evening prayers, his voice a soft murmur in the candlelit stillness. The lord and lady retire to their solo. A private chamber hung with tapestries and warmed by a small fire. Here, they review the day's events, discuss plans for tomorrow, and perhaps share a quiet moment away from the bustle of the household. The steward brings a final report, news from the village, a list of supplies to be ordered, and, inevitably, a gentle reminder about the cheese. The lady writes a letter by candlelight, her quill scratching softly on the parchment, while the lord gazes out the window at the moonlit courtyard below. In the servants' quarters, the day ends with laughter and stories. The maids and stable boys share tales of mishaps and small triumphs. A drop tray, a stubborn horse, a particularly clever way to sneak an extra slice of pie. The camaraderie is real, the bonds forged by shared work, and the quiet pride of keeping the castle running smoothly. If you've ever ended a long day with friends, swapping stories and savoring the simple comfort of belonging, you'll know the feeling. As the castle settles into sleep, the only sounds are the soft crackle of the fire, the distant hoot of an owl, and the gentle breathing of those tucked safely within its walls. The guards keep watch from the towers, their eyes scanning the darkness, but the night is peaceful, the world outside held at bay by stone and tradition. There are oddities and small wonders even now. A secret passage known only to the oldest servant, a tapestry that hides a forgotten alcove, a rumor of treasure buried beneath the floorboards. The castle is a place of stories, some true, some fanciful, all woven into the fabric of daily life. The walls remember every laugh, every whispered secret, every quiet moment of hope or longing. And so, a day in the life of a medieval castle comes to a gentle close, not with a clash of swords or a grand adventure, but with the quiet magic of shared meals, warm fires, and the enduring comfort of home. The castle stands as it has for centuries, a haven in a changing world, its stones holding the memory of countless days, just like this one. Moving on to the next story, let's begin at dawn, as the first pale light glimmers on the edge of a fjord. The village is just waking, the world outside still wrapped in mist. Somewhere a rooster crows, though in true Viking fashion. He sounds more like he's issuing a challenge than a greeting. The longhouse is warm and dim, the fire in the hearth reduced to glowing embers. The scent of last night's stew lingers in the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of woolen blankets and the sharper tang of pine resin. Our guide for the day is a runemaster, a carver of symbols, a keeper of secrets, and if we're honest, someone who probably spends a little too much time talking to stones. His name is Eric, and he rises early, stretching his arms and listening to the soft sounds of the village, waking up the clatter of wooden bowls, the low murmur of voices, and the distant splash of oars as a fisherman heads out onto the water. Eric's hands are rough and stained with ink, his nails edged with the dust of stone and wood. If you've ever tried to get paint out from under your fingernails, you'll have some sympathy for the rune master's daily struggle. Breakfast is a simple affair: flatbread, a wedge of cheese, and a cup of sour milk that's more invigorating than it sounds. Eric eats with his family, sharing a few quiet jokes and a gentle argument about whether the new goat is a blessing or a curse. The goat, for her part, seems entirely unconcerned, but the conversation drifts, as it often does, to the runes, those strange angular marks that appear on stones, weapons, and the occasional piece of driftwood. Eric's daughter asks if the runes really have magic in them. He smiles, shrugs, and says, "Only if you know how to listen." The day's work begins outside, in the clear morning air. Eric gathers his tools: a small iron chisel, a wooden mallet, and a pouch of ochre for highlighting the carvings. He walks to the edge of the village, where a new stone stands waiting. The stone is rough and grey, flecked with lichen, and just the right size for a memorial. Eric runs his fingers over its surface, feeling for the grain, the hidden lines that will guide his work. He sketches the first runes with a piece of charcoal, the symbols sharp and angular, each one a blend of art and code. The runes themselves are a marvel: 24 shapes, each with its own name, sound, and secret meaning. There's Fihu, the rune of wealth and cattle; Euros, the rune of strength and wild oxen; Ansars, the rune of the gods and the spoken word. The runes are more than just letters. They are symbols of power, memory, and connection. Eric explains that to carve a rune is to make a promise, to remember, to honor, to bind the present to the past. If you've ever left your initials in wet cement, you've felt a little of that urge to leave a mark, to say, "I was here." As Eric works, the village moves around him. Children chase each other through the grass, their laughter echoing off the stones. A pair of women carry baskets of fish from the shore, their voices rising in a song that's older than the runes themselves. The blacksmith hammers at his anvil, sending up sparks that dance in the morning light. The world is alive with sound and movement, but Eric's focus is steady, his hands sure. The chisel bites into the stone, each tap a small act of creation. There are oddities and small mysteries everywhere. Eric pauses to show a curious boy how to carve a simple rune: a straight line crossed by two shorter lines, the mark of Iwaz, the yew tree, for protection. Eric says, "Hand for patience." The boy nods solemnly, as if he's just been entrusted with the secret to the universe. Nearby, an old woman ties a strip of cloth around a standing stone, whispering a prayer for her son at sea. The runes, she believes, will carry her words to the gods. The rune master's work is not just about carving stones. He is also a keeper of stories, a reader of omens, and, on occasion, a reluctant mediator in village disputes. People come to him with questions about lost cattle, about dreams, about the best day to set sail. Eric listens, nods, and sometimes offers a rune: cast a handful of small stones, each marked with a symbol, tossed onto a cloth, and read like the pages of a book. The answers are never simple, but then, neither is life in the north. As the sun climbs higher, Eric takes a break, sitting on a fallen log and watching the world go by. He thinks about the runes, how they came to the north, how they changed and grew, how they hold the memory of a people who lived by the sea and the sword. He wonders what stories the stones will tell 1,000 years from now, when the village is gone and the runes remain, silent and mysterious. And so, as the morning drifts into midday, we find ourselves in a world where every mark has meaning. Every stone holds a secret, and the quiet work of the runemaster is the thread that binds the past to the present. As midday settles over the village, the world grows brighter and busier. The sun glints off the water, and the air is filled with the mingled scents of pine, seaweed, and the faint, ever-present aroma of smoked fish. Eric, our runemaster, wipes his brow and steps back from the stone, admiring the progress he's made. The runes catch the light, their sharp lines standing out against the rough grey surface, each one a small promise carved into the heart of the land. After a quick lunch, flatbread, dried fish, and a handful of berries, Eric is called to the longhouse. The chieftain, a broad-shouldered man with a beard that could shelter a family of sparrows, has a request. A new ship is being built, and the chieftain wants a runic inscription on the prow for luck and safe passage. Eric nods, already thinking of the right combination of runes. Perhaps Rado for the journey, Algiz for protection, and maybe a little Ansaz for eloquence, just in case the ship needs to talk its way out of trouble. Sir, you never know with ships. Some are born negotiators, others just like to drift. The shipyard is a hive of activity. Carpenters shape planks with broad axes, their rhythmic blows echoing across the water. Children dart between the boats, playing games and occasionally getting underfoot, while the shipwrights shout instructions and share the latest gossip. Eric finds a quiet moment to consult with the chieftain, who insists on a particularly fierce dragon's head for the prow. It should scare away spirits and tax collectors alike, he says, only half joking. Eric sketches the runes on a scrap of birch bark, explaining their meanings as he goes. The chieftain listens, nodding thoughtfully, and then asks if there's a rune for "May the crew remember to bathe." Eric laughs and suggests a double dose of Laguz, the rune of water. Carving runes on a ship is a special task. The wood is softer than stone, but the meaning is just as deep. Eric works carefully, his chisel tracing the ancient shapes, each stroke a blend of tradition and hope. The shipwrights watch with interest, some skeptical, others quietly respectful. One old sailor insists on touching the runes for luck before the ship is launched, while another mutters that it's all nonsense, until he remembers the time his boat capsized, and the only thing that floated was a plank with a rune for endurance. Coincidence, perhaps, but in the north, you learn to hedge your bets. The runes are not just for ships and stones. Eric is often asked to carve them on tools, weapons, and even jewelry. A young woman brings him a small bone comb, asking for a rune to keep her hair untangled and her suitors honest. Eric chooses Jibo, the rune of gifts and fair exchange, and adds a tiny tiwaz for justice, just in case. The woman thanks him with a smile and a loaf of honey bread, which Eric considers a fair trade, especially since his own heir has long since given up the fight. There are stories, too, that swirl around the runes. Some say they were a gift from Odin himself, who hung from the world tree for 9 nights to learn their secrets. Others claim the runes can heal wounds, calm storms, or reveal the future, though Eric is quick to point out that they're less reliable than a good weather eye or a well-stocked medicine chest. Still, the runes have power, if only because people believe in them. They are a language of hope and memory, a way to make sense of a world that is often wild and unpredictable. In the afternoon, Eric visits the village healer, a woman named Astrid who knows as much about herbs as she does about people. She asks him to carve a set of runes for her medicine chest, Burkana for growth, Iwaz for endurance, and Soilo for health. As he works, they talk about the old days, about the times when runes were forbidden by kings and priests, and about the quiet ways people kept their traditions alive. Astrid shows him a bundle of dried yarrow, explaining how it can stop bleeding and, if you're feeling poetic, encourage dreams of summer. Eric carves the runes with care, knowing that sometimes the smallest marks can carry the greatest weight. As the sun begins to dip, the village prepares for evening. The fishermen return with their catch, the children are called home, and the longhouse fills with the sounds of laughter and song. Eric joins his family by the fire, sharing stories of the day and listening to the old tales of gods and giants, of heroes and monsters, of runes that can open doors and hearts alike. The fire crackles, the shadows dance, and the runes on the stones outside glow softly in the fading light. And so, as the day drifts toward night, the secret history of the Viking runes continues. Etched in wood and stone, whispered in stories, and carried in the hearts of those who believe that every mark, every word, and every memory matters. Night has settled over the village, and the world is wrapped in a gentle hush. The moon hangs low above the fjord, its pale light shimmering on the water and casting long, silvery shadows across the grass. The air is cool and still, tinged with the scent of pine and the faint smoke of dying fires. Inside the longhouse, the warmth of the hearth draws people close, and the day's work gives way to the quiet rituals of evening. Eric, our runemaster, sits by the fire, a fresh piece of driftwood in his lap and his carving tools at hand. The children gather around, their eyes wide with curiosity and the hope of a new story. Eric obliges, tracing the first rune into the wood as he begins to speak. He tells them of Odin, the Allfather, who sacrificed himself on the world tree, Yggdrasil, to win the wisdom of the runes. He describes how Odin hung for 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, until the shapes of the runes revealed themselves in the roots and branches. The runes are a gift, Eric says, but like all gifts from the gods, they come with a price: patience, courage, and a willingness to listen. The children listen, spellbound, as Eric weaves tales of runes used for love charms, for protection in battle, and for sending secret messages across the sea. He shows them how to carve a simple rune, perhaps Algiz the elk for safety, or Wunjo, the joy rune for happiness. The children try their hands at carving, their lines wobbly but earnest, and Eric praises each effort, knowing that every mark is a step toward memory. As the fire burns low, the adults share their own stories. A fisherman recalls the time he found a rune, carved stone on the shore, and after carrying it in his pocket, caught the biggest cod of his life. A weaver remembers her grandmother tracing runes on the doorframe each spring to keep out misfortune. Even the chieftain, usually so stoic, admits to wearing a small rune amulet beneath his tunic, just in case the gods are watching. He says with a wink, there are oddities and quiet wonders in the runes' history. Some stones bear messages that no one can quite decipher. Riddles, jokes, or perhaps just the ancient equivalent of Kilroy was here. Others are memorials, marking the lives of those who have passed, their names and deeds preserved in stone long after the memories have faded. Eric sometimes wonders what future generations will make of these marks. Will they see them as magic, as art, or simply as the stubborn hope of people who wanted to be remembered? The runes are not just relics of the past. They are living symbols, woven into the fabric of daily life. Eric's wife ties a strip of cloth with a rune for health around the cradle of their youngest child. The healer leaves a rune-marked stone in her garden to encourage the herbs to grow strong. Even the village dogs, it's rumored, have a favorite rune. though Eric suspects this has more to do with the scent of smoked fish than any particular symbol. As the night deepens, the longhouse grows quiet. The children drift off to sleep, their dreams filled with stories of gods and giants, of ships that sail to the edge of the world, and of runes that glow in the moonlight. Eric tidies his tools, sets aside his driftwood, and steps outside for a moment of peace. The village is still, the only sound the gentle lapping of water against the shore and the distant call of an owl. Eric looks up at the stars, their patterns as mysterious as the runes themselves. He thinks of the stories he has told, the marks he has made, and the quiet power of memory. The runes, he knows, are more than just letters. They are a way of seeing, a way of connecting the present to the past and the future. They are a reminder that every life, no matter how small, leaves a mark on the world. And so the secret history of the Viking runes comes to rest, not in a hidden treasure or a forgotten spell, but in the gentle rhythms of daily life, the warmth of shared stories, and the enduring hope that, in the end, every word matters. Moving on to a life as a scribe in ancient Egypt, let's begin at dawn. As the first golden light spills over the city of Thebes, the temple complex is just waking, its massive pylons casting long shadows across the courtyard. The air is cool and fresh, carrying the aroma of damp earth incense and the faint sweetness of date bread baking somewhere nearby. In the distance, the Nile flows slow and steady, its banks alive with the calls of fishermen and the lowing of cattle. The world is both ancient and familiar, a place where daily life unfolds in rhythms shaped by the river, the sun, and the ever-watchful eyes of the gods. Our scribe, let's call him Mena, a name as old as the stones, rises from his mat in a small, tidy room tucked within the temple's outer walls. The room is simple but comfortable: a low bed, a reed mat, a battered wooden chest, and a shelf lined with papyrus scrolls and ink pots. Mena stretches, feeling the cool stone beneath his feet, and listens to the soft sounds of the temple, waking up the distant chant of priests, the clatter of servants preparing the morning meal, and the gentle cooing of doves in the rafters. If you've ever woken up in a house full of early risers, you'll know the feeling. Except here, the neighbors are more likely to be reciting hymns than arguing over the last piece of toast. Breakfast is a quiet affair. Mena joins a few fellow scribes in a shaded corner of the courtyard, where they share bowls of porridge, figs, and a cup of sweet beer. The conversation is low and easy. News from the city, a joke about the high priest's new sandals, rumor has it they squeak, and the usual grumbling about the quality of the ink. Too thin, says one scribe, swirling his pot. Too thick, says another, poking at a dried-up lump. Mena just smiles and dips his reed pen, knowing that, in the end, it's not the ink but the hand that matters. The day's work begins in the scriptorium, a cool, dim room lined with shelves of papyrus and jars of ink in every imaginable shade. Sunlight filters through high windows, illuminating dust motes that dance in the air. The walls are painted with scenes of scribes at work, some serious, some with a sly wink, as if to remind everyone that even the most dignified profession has its moments of mischief. The head scribe, a stern man with a fondness for puns and a talent for catching mistakes, assigns the day's tasks, copying hymns, recording temple accounts, and, for the lucky few, illustrating a new scroll with images of lotus flowers and sacred animals. Mena settles at his desk, a low wooden table worn smooth by years of use. He unrolls a fresh sheet of papyrus, dips his pen in it, and begins to write. The script flows from right to left, each sign carefully shaped, each word a small act of devotion. The work is slow and steady, a kind of meditation. Outside, the world bustles with activity, priests chanting, servants sweeping, gardeners tending to the temple's sacred ponds. But in the scriptorium, time seems to slow, each moment marked by the soft scratch of pen on papyrus. There are challenges, of course. The ink dries too quickly in the heat, or not quickly enough when the air is damp. A careless elbow can send a pot tumbling, leaving a blot that will be the subject of jokes for weeks. And then there are the hieroglyphs themselves. Beautiful, complex, and occasionally infuriating. Mena pauses over a particularly tricky sign, wondering for the 100th time why the gods needed so many birds in their alphabet. If you've ever tried to decipher a doctor's handwriting, you'll have some sympathy for the apprentice scribes. But there are joys, too. The satisfaction of a perfectly formed sign, the quiet pride in seeing your work displayed in the temple, the camaraderie of shared labor. Mena glances at his neighbor, who is illustrating a scene of the goddess Hathor with a steady hand and a mischievous smile. Careful? Mena whispers, if you make her too beautiful, the priests will never let you leave. The neighbor grins and adds an extra curl to Hathor's hair just for luck. As the morning wears on, the head scribe makes his rounds, offering advice, correcting mistakes, and, occasionally, sharing a story from his own days as an apprentice. Remember, he says, a scribe's greatest tool is not his pen, but his patience. Mena nods, making a mental note to add that to his own collection of wise sayings. Right next to, never trust a cat near wet ink. The scriptorium is a place of learning as well as labor. Older scribes teach the younger ones, sharing tricks for mixing ink, sharpening pens, and keeping papyrus from curling in the heat. There are lessons in math and astronomy, in law and literature, in the art of making a scroll that will last for centuries. The work is demanding, but the rewards are real respect, security, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that your words will outlast even the mightiest pharaoh. As midday approaches, the scribes take a break, stepping out into the sunlit courtyard to stretch their legs and share a meal. The air is warm, filled with the scent of blooming lotus and the distant sound of temple music. Mena sits with his friends beneath a shady palm, savoring a piece of honey cake and listening to the gentle murmur of the fountain. The world feels timeless, suspended between the past and the future, each moment a small miracle of peace. And so, as the sun climbs higher and the shadows grow short, we find ourselves in a world where words are sacred. Patience is a virtue, and the quiet work of a scribe is the foundation on which empires are built. The midday sun hangs high over Thebes, casting sharp shadows along the temple's whitewashed walls. The courtyard is alive with gentle activity. Priests in linen robes move purposefully between shrines. Gardeners tend to beds of papyrus and blue lotus, and the temple cat, regal, aloof, and entirely convinced of her own divinity, stalks a sunbeam with the focus of a seasoned hunter. The air is warm and fragrant, carrying the mingled scents of incense, fresh bread, and the sweet tang of ripening figs. After their break, Mena and his fellow scribes return to the cool refuge of the scriptorium. The room is quieter now, the morning's chatter replaced by a focused hush. Mena's next task is to record the temple's offerings, a daily ritual as sacred as any prayer. He carefully lists the loaves of bread, jars of beer, baskets of fruit, and cuts of meat brought by the priests. Each item is tallied with a precise mark. Every number double, checked. If you've ever tried to keep track of a potluck dinner, you'll appreciate the challenge. Though in Mena's case, the gods are the guests, and they're notoriously particular about their portions. The scribe's work is not just about numbers and lists. They are the keepers of stories, the guardians of memory. Mena is sometimes called upon to record the deeds of the pharaoh, the victories of generals, or the dreams of priests. He writes with care, knowing that his words may one day be read by future generations, or, at the very least, by a particularly nosy temple inspector. The papyrus scrolls are stored in cool, dark rooms, their secrets safe from the sun and the ever-curious temple mice. Occasionally, Mena is asked to compose a letter for a priest or a wealthy patron. These letters are formal, filled with flowery greetings and elaborate blessings. May the gods grant you health, wealth, and a minimum of sand in your sandals, he writes, tongue firmly in cheek. The art of polite exaggeration is alive and well in ancient Egypt, and Mena has learned to sprinkle his letters with just enough flattery to keep everyone happy. If you've ever written a thank you note that was more creative than sincere, you're in good company. The afternoon brings a change of pace. The head scribe announces that a new wall inscription is to be drafted for the temple's main hall, a record of a recent festival in honor of a moon. Mena and a few others are chosen to help. They gather their tools, reed pens, pots of black and red ink, and a set of wooden rulers for keeping the lines straight. The work is done on a large sheet of papyrus first, the text carefully planned and the illustrations sketched in the margins. There's a quiet excitement in the air. To see one's work carved in stone is the highest honor for a scribe. As they work, the scribes discuss the details of the festival, the music, the dancers, the offerings, and the moment when the high priest's headdress nearly toppled into the sacred fire. A sign from the gods, one scribe jokes, or just a reminder to tie your knots tighter. The laughter is soft, respectful. After all, the walls have ears, and the gods are said to have a keen sense of humor. The process of preparing a wall inscription is meticulous. The text must be perfect, the hieroglyphs clear and beautiful. Mistakes are not easily erased when working in stone, so every word is checked and rechecked. Mena's hand is steady, his mind focused. He chooses each sign with care, balancing meaning and beauty. The illustrations are added last, scenes of priests making offerings, musicians playing lyres, and dancers moving in graceful lines. The finished draft is a work of art, ready to be handed over to the stone carvers, who will bring it to life on the temple wall. As the afternoon light slants through the high windows, Mena takes a moment to stretch and look around. The scriptorium is a world of quiet industry. One scribe recites a hymn under his breath as he copies it. Another sharpens his pen with a practiced flick, and a third, lost in thought, doodles a tiny cat in the margin of a legal document. The head scribe pretends not to notice. After all, a little whimsy never hurt anyone, and the temple cat does deserve her own place in history. Outside, the temple is preparing for evening rituals. The priests gather in the main hall, their voices rising in a chorus of chants. The scent of incense drifts through the corridors, mingling with the golden light of the setting sun. Mena and his fellow scribes finish their work for the day, carefully storing their tools and rolling up their scrolls. The head scribe offers a few words of praise and a gentle reminder to double-check tomorrow's inventory of wine jars. The gods may be forgiving, he says, but the high priest is not. As the sun dips below the horizon, the temple glows with the soft light of oil lamps. Mena joins his friends in the courtyard, where the air is cool and the stars begin to appear. They share a simple meal: bread, cheese, and a handful of dates, while the city of Thebes settles into the gentle hush of evening. The day's work is done, but the stories linger, written in ink and stone, waiting to be read by those who come after. And so, as night falls over the temple, the life of a scribe continues. A quiet blend of duty, artistry, and the small, enduring joys of words well written and stories well kept. As night deepens over Thebes, the temple settles into a gentle hush. The air cools, carrying the scent of night, blooming jasmine, and the faint, sweet smoke of incense drifting from the sanctuary. The great pylons cast long shadows across the courtyard, and the only sounds are the distant croak of frogs along the Nile and the soft murmur of priests reciting prayers to the stars. The world feels timeless, suspended between earth and sky, as if the gods themselves are pausing to listen. Mena, our scribe, lingers in the scriptorium, tidying his desk by the light of a flickering oil lamp. The day's work is done, but he takes a moment to review the scrolls he's copied, running his fingers over the smooth papyrus and admiring the neat rows of hieroglyphs. There's a quiet pride in this ritual, a sense that, in his own small way, he's helped preserve the memory of his people. If you've ever reread something you wrote and thought, not bad, you'll understand the feeling. Before leaving, Mena adds a few lines to his personal journal, a habit shared by many scribes. He writes about the day's tasks, the jokes traded with friends, and the small triumph of finally mastering a particularly tricky sign for prosperity. He sketches a quick drawing of the temple cat, curled up on a pile of scrolls, and makes a note to ask the head scribe about a new kind of ink rumored to be arriving from the Delta. The journal is a private space, a place for dreams and questions, for the little details that never make it onto the official records. Outside, the temple is bathed in moonlight. The priests move in silent procession, carrying offerings to the inner sanctum. The scent of frankincense and myrrh drifts on the breeze, mingling with the earthy aroma of the riverbank. Mena pauses in the courtyard, watching as the high priest lifts a golden ball to the sky, his voice rising in a hymn that echoes off the ancient stones. The ceremony is both grand and intimate, a reminder that, in Egypt, the sacred and the everyday are never far apart. After the rituals, Mena joins a few friends on the temple roof, where the view stretches out over the city and the dark ribbon of the Nile. They sit together, sharing stories and laughter, pointing out constellations and making quiet wishes. Someone tells a tale of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, who is said to watch over all scribes and reward those who write with care. Perhaps he'll send us a new set of pens. Mena jokes, holding up his ink-stained fingers. The others laugh, and for a moment, the worries of the world seem very far away. There are oddities and small wonders in every corner of temple life. Sometimes, a scribe is called upon to interpret a dream for a priest, or to compose a love letter for a nervous young acolyte. There are days when the ink runs out at the worst possible moment, or when a gust of wind scatters carefully stacked papyrus across the floor. An ancient version of the office printer jam, but with more hieroglyphs and fewer apologies to IT. And there are moments of quiet joy, the first taste of fresh dates in the spring, the cool relief of a breeze through the scriptorium, the satisfaction of a story well told. The scribes are a diverse group, men and women, young and old, from families of farmers, artisans, and priests. Some dream of rising to the rank of chief scribe, Others are content to spend their days copying hymns and keeping accounts. All share a love of words, a respect for tradition, and a sense of belonging to something greater than themselves. In a world where pharaohs rise and fall, where dynasties change and temples crumble, the work of the scribe endures, quiet, steady, and essential. As the night grows late, Mena returns to his small room, where the air is cool and the city is silent. He lies on his mat, listening to the distant sounds of the temple and the gentle lapping of the Nile. He thinks of the stories he has written, the prayers he has copied, and the dreams he has recorded. He wonders what tomorrow will bring: a new festival, a new inscription, perhaps a new joke about the high priest's sandals. And so, the life of a scribe in an ancient Egyptian temple comes to a gentle close. Not with grand proclamations or dramatic endings, but with the quiet satisfaction of a day well spent, a story well told, and the comforting certainty that, in the end, every word matters. Moving on to the bizarre world of a Roman bathhouse, let's begin at dawn, as the first rays of sunlight slip over the rooftops of Rome. The city is just waking, the air still cool and fresh, carrying the scent of baking bread, olive oil, and the faint tang of wood smoke. In the distance, the Tiber glimmers, and the streets are alive with the soft clatter of sandals and the low murmur of early risers. But here, at the grand entrance to the local thermae, the public bathhouse, the day is already beginning to stir. The bathhouse itself is a marvel of Roman engineering and ambition. Imagine a sprawling complex of courtyards, gardens, and grand halls, all built from gleaming marble and decorated with mosaics that shimmer in the morning light. The air is thick with the scent of lavender and myrtle, mingling with the earthy aroma of wet stone and the occasional whiff of something less poetic from the nearby latrines. Let's just say the Romans were masters of architecture, but even they couldn't make everything smell like roses. Our guide for the day is Lucius, a scribe with a fondness for gossip and a talent for finding the warmest spot in any room. Lucius arrives early, carrying a small basket with a towel, a jar of perfumed oil, and a strigil, a curved metal tool for scraping off sweat and oil, which is the ancient Roman equivalent of a loofah, but with a bit more dramatic flair. He greets the doorkeeper, who, for a modest fee, hands him a small token and a knowing smile. The bathhouse is open for business. Inside, the world is a symphony of sound and sensation. The first stop is the appetiterium, or changing room, where men and women errs in separate areas, of course. Romans were progressive, but not that progressive undress and store their clothes in small cubbyholes. Slaves and attendants bustle about, helping their masters disrobe and keeping a watchful eye on the valuables. Lucius, ever cautious, slips a coin to the attendant and makes a mental note to check his sandals on the way out. After all, nothing ruins a relaxing bath like discovering your best tunic has gone missing. It's the ancient Roman version of losing your flip-flops at the pool. From the changing room, Lucius moves to the palestra, the open-air exercise yard. Here, the truly dedicated, or perhaps just the truly competitive, engage in wrestling, ball games, and a variety of exercises that seem designed to work up a sweat as quickly as possible. The air is filled with the grunts of effort, the slap of leather balls, and the occasional good-natured taunt. Lucius, preferring to conserve his energy for more important pursuits, a light napping, watches from the sidelines, offering encouragement and the occasional sarcastic remark. Remember, Marcus, it's not the winning that counts. It's making sure you don't pull a muscle before lunch, once sufficiently warmed up. Or In Lucius's case, sufficiently entertained, it's time to enter the baths themselves. The journey begins in the tepidarium, a warm, steamy room lined with benches and decorated with intricate mosaics. The air is thick with humidity, and the walls gleam with condensation. Here, bathers relax, chat, and prepare for the next stage of the ritual. Lucius settles onto a bench, closing his eyes and listening to the gentle hum of conversation merchants discussing the latest grain prices, poets reciting verses, and a pair of philosophers debating whether the water is truly warm or just a clever illusion. Spoiler, it's warm. The next stop is the caldarium, the hot room. This is the heart of the bathhouse, a steamy, almost otherworldly space heated by a hypocaust, an ingenious system of underfloor fires that keeps the air toasty and the water piping hot. The caldarium is filled with swirling steam, the air heavy with the scent of eucalyptus and the occasional whiff of singed hair. Bathers sit on stone benches, sweat pouring down their faces, as they ladle hot water over themselves and scrape away the grime of the day with their trusty strigils. Lucius, ever the observer, notes that the caldarium is also the best place for eavesdropping. Secrets, it seems, are more easily shared when everyone is half, blinded by steam and slightly dizzy from the heat. There are oddities and small wonders everywhere. A vendor wanders through the baths, selling honey cakes and spiced wine to anyone in need of refreshment. A group of children splash in a shallow pool, their laughter echoing off the marble walls. In one corner, a pair of old friends play a game of dice, their voices rising in mock outrage as the luck of the gods turns against them. And, of course, there's always that one bather who insists on singing at the top of his lungs, convinced that the acoustics of the caldarium were designed specifically for his rendition of Ode to Bacchus. The jury is still out on that one. As the morning drifts toward midday, Lucius prepares for the next stage of the ritual, the plunge into the frigidarium, the cold pool. But that, dear listener, is a story for the next chapter of our journey through the bizarre and wonderful world of the Roman bathhouse. After the steamy embrace of the caldarium, Lucius and his fellow bathers make their way, with varying degrees of enthusiasm, toward the frigidarium, the cold plunge pool. The transition is not for the faint of heart. The air grows noticeably cooler, and the marble underfoot feels almost shockingly brisk. The frigidarium itself is a marvel, a sunken pool of clear, cold water, its surface shimmering in the filtered light that streams through high windows. The walls are decorated with mosaics of dolphins and sea gods, as if to remind everyone that, yes, this is supposed to be enjoyable. Lucius hesitates at the edge, exchanging nervous glances with a merchant who claims he once saw a senator shriek like a startled peacock upon entering the pool. With a resigned sigh, Lucius takes the plunge, the cold water closing over him in a rush that is both bracing and, after a moment, oddly invigorating. Around him, bathers gasp, laugh, and splash, the shock of the cold giving way to a sense of renewal. It's the Roman equivalent of a double espresso, guaranteed to wake you up, clear your mind, and possibly make you question your life choices. After the plunge, Lucius wraps himself in a towel and finds a spot in the solarium, the sunlit terrace where bathers lounge and dry off. The air here is warm and gentle, scented with rosemary and the faint sweetness of figs from a nearby vendor's tray. Some guests nap in the sun, while others chat quietly, their voices blending with the distant hum of the city. A pair of elderly senators debate the merits of olive oil versus imported Gallic soap, while a group of young men compare the latest gladiator gossip. Lucius, ever the scribe, makes mental notes for future stories. After all, the bathhouse is the best place in Rome to collect both news and rumors, and sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. The bathhouse is more than just a place to get clean. It's a social hub, a business center, and, for some, a stage. In one corner, a poet recites verses to a small but appreciative audience, his words echoing off the marble. Nearby, a pair of merchants haggle over the price of Egyptian linen, their negotiations punctuated by the occasional splash from a nearby pool. Children dart between the columns, their laughter ringing out as they play a game that seems to involve equal parts running, shouting, and creative rule interpretation. The rules, as far as Lucius can tell, are mostly optional. There are odd facts and curious customs everywhere you look. Some bathers swear by a vigorous massage with olive oil, followed by a thorough scraping with a strigil. Others prefer a gentle rub-down with perfumed powders, or a visit to the unctorium, where attendants offer everything from hair plucking to elaborate beard styling. Yes, even in ancient Rome, self-care was a competitive sport. The bathhouse also boasts a small library, where those seeking a quieter moment can browse scrolls of poetry, philosophy, or the latest political satire. Though Lucius suspects that most visitors are more interested in the gossip than the classics. The staff of the bathhouse are a world unto themselves. Attendants move quietly through the halls, offering towels, oil, and the occasional bit of advice on the best time to visit the caldarium. The doorkeeper keeps a watchful eye on the entrance, his memory for faces and debts legendary. The masseurs are masters of their craft, able to knead away the aches of a long day. Or, if you're unlucky, to find every sore spot you never knew you had. The vendors are quick with a joke and quicker with a tray of honey cakes, always ready to tempt even the most disciplined bather. As the afternoon wears on, the bathhouse grows busier. The air is filled with the sounds of conversation, laughter, and the gentle splash of water. The light shifts, casting golden patterns on the marble floors. Lucius finds himself drawn into a game of dice with a pair of merchants, their fortunes rising and falling with each throw. The stakes are modest, a few coins, a promise of a favor, and, for the loser, the honor of reciting a poem in the caldarium. Lucius, who has a talent for both dice and poetry, is quietly confident. There are moments of quiet, too. In a shaded corner, an old woman sits with her granddaughter, teaching her the art of weaving a garland from fresh myrtle. A philosopher, lost in thought, traces patterns in the condensation on a marble bench. The bathhouse, for all its bustle, is a place where time seems to slow, where the worries of the outside world are left at the door, and where even the most ambitious Roman can find a moment of peace. As the sun begins to set, the bathers prepare to leave, gathering their belongings and exchanging farewells. Lucius lingers for a moment, savoring the last warmth of the solarium and the gentle hum of voices. The bathhouse has worked its magic once again, body and mind refreshed, spirit restored, and, if he's lucky, a new story or two to share over supper. And so, as the day drifts toward evening, the bizarre and wonderful world of the Roman bathhouse continues, full of laughter, ritual, and the quiet comfort of shared routine. As dusk settles over Rome, the bathhouse glows with a gentle, golden light. The marble floors are warm beneath bare feet, and the air is thick with the mingled scents of oil, herbs, and the faint sweetness of honey cakes. The crowds begin to thin, but the bathhouse is far from empty. In fact, this is when the atmosphere softens, the laughter grows quieter, and the rituals of the evening take on a more relaxed, almost dreamy cadence. Lucius, our ever-curious scribe, finds himself back in the tepidarium, the warm room where bathers gather to unwind before heading home. The steam is softer now, curling lazily around the columns, and the conversations are more subdued. A pair of friends reminisce about childhood games played in the forum, while an elderly merchant recounts the time he nearly missed a ship to Alexandria because he lost track of time in the caldarium. He claims it was the best missed ship of his life. He met his wife at the bathhouse that very afternoon, and she's been reminding him to check the time ever since. The attendants move quietly through the rooms, offering towels and a final dab of perfumed oil. Some bathers linger for a massage, the gentle kneading of tired muscles accompanied by the soft clink of oil jars and the low hum of contented sighs. Others visit the unctorium for a last touch of grooming, perhaps a careful beard trim or a quick pluck of a stray hair. Roman standards of beauty were not for the faint of heart, and the untorium is proof that self-care has always been a little bit about suffering for the cause. In a quiet corner, Lucius finds the Bathhouse library, a small but well-loved room lined with scrolls and wax tablets. Here, a few bathers read by lamplight, their faces serene in the golden glow. The librarian, a patient soul with a talent for finding lost scrolls and lost sandals, offers Lucius a new poem by Ovid. Lucius settles onto a bench, savoring the words and the rare peace. Outside, the city is alive with the sounds of evening. Vendors calling, musicians tuning their lyres, and the distant clatter of chariots on cobblestones. But within these walls, time seems to slow. The world reduced to the gentle rhythm of breath and the soft turning of pages. There are oddities and small wonders even now. A group of children, their hair still damp from the frigidarium, play a game of knucklebones in the atrium, their laughter echoing off the marble. A pair of philosophers debate the nature of happiness, their voices rising and falling like the tide. One claims that true happiness is a life of virtue. The other insists it's a life with regular access to the caldarium and a steady supply of honey cakes. Lucius, ever the diplomat, suggests that perhaps it's both, and is promptly invited to join them for supper. As the last light fades, the bathhouse begins to empty. Bathers collect their belongings, thank the attendants, and step out into the cool Roman night, their skin tingling and their spirits light. Lucius lingers for a moment at the entrance, looking back at the mosaic floors, the flickering lamps, and the gentle swirl of steam. He thinks of the stories he's heard, the friendships forged, and the small, daily rituals that make the bathhouse not just a place to get clean, but a place to belong. The world outside is vast and unpredictable, but within the walls of the bathhouse, there is order, comfort, and a kind of quiet magic. Here, senators and slaves, poets and merchants, strangers and friends all share the same water, the same laughter, the same fleeting moments of peace. It's a reminder that, for all the differences that divide us, there are places, real and imagined, where we can simply be together. And so, the bizarre world of the Roman bathhouse comes to a gentle close, not with a grand spectacle or a dramatic revelation, but with the soft hush of evening, the warmth of shared stories, and the enduring comfort of routine. Lucius steps out into the night, the city lights twinkling above, and makes his way home, already looking forward to tomorrow's visit. And perhaps, just perhaps, another honey cake. Moving on to the art and science of building a Roman aqueduct. Let's begin not in the crowded streets of Rome, but in the cool, green hills many miles away. The air is fresh, tinged with the scent of wild thyme and cypress, and the distant sound of sheep bells drifts on the breeze. Here, at the source of a clear, bubbling spring, a small group of Roman engineers gathers at first light. Their tunics are dusty, their sandals worn, and their faces shaded by broad-brimmed hats. They carry tools both simple and mysterious wooden rods, plumb lines, and a curious device called a chorobates, a kind of ancient spirit level, if you will, though with a lot more wood and a lot less bubble. The surveyor's task is deceptively simple: find a path for water to flow, gently and steadily, all the way to the city. But the land is anything but simple. There are hills to cross, valleys to span, and the ever-present challenge of gravity, which, as any Roman engineer could tell you, is both a friend and a relentless taskmaster. The surveyors pace the ground, sighting along their rods, marking the road with chalk and small piles of stones. They argue quietly about gradients and angles, their Latin punctuated by the occasional sigh, or, when things go wrong, a phrase that's probably best left untranslated. Once the path is chosen, the real work begins. Laborers arrive by the dozens, carrying picks, shovels, and baskets for earth and stone. The site is soon alive with the sounds of digging and laughter, the clatter of tools, and the low hum of conversation. Some workers are free men, others are slaves or prisoners of war, but all are united by the rhythm of the task. The foreman, a man with a voice like a trumpet and a heart of gold, keeps everyone moving with a mix of encouragement and the occasional well-aimed joke. If you've ever worked on a team project where the coffee ran out before the enthusiasm, you'll recognize the atmosphere. The first stage is the trench, a long, shallow cut in the earth, following the gentle slope mapped out by the surveyors. The soil is heavy, the sun grows hot, and the work is slow. But there's a sense of purpose here, a feeling that every shovelful brings the city a little closer to its lifeblood. Children from nearby farms watch from a safe distance, their eyes wide with curiosity. Occasionally, a local farmer will wander over, offering a jug of wine or a handful of figs in exchange for news of the city. The laborers accept with gratitude, and the break is filled with laughter and the sharing of stories. Some true, some wildly exaggerated, all part of the day's work. As the trench grows, the masons move in. Their hands are calloused, their tunics dusted with lime, and their eyes sharp for the smallest imperfection. They lay the first stones with care, fitting each one so tightly that not even a blade of grass can slip between them. The mortar is mixed in great troughs, a blend of lime, sand and water, stirred with wooden paddles until it's just right. The masons work in teams, passing stones hand to hand, their movements as practiced as a dance. If you've ever watched a group of friends assemble flat, pack furniture without arguing, you'll appreciate the rare harmony of a well-run work site. Let's pause for a moment to marvel at the Roman approach to engineering. Every detail is considered, from the curve of the channel to the thickness of the walls. The aqueduct must be strong enough to last for centuries, yet precise enough to carry water at just the right speed. Too fast, and the channel will erode. Too slow, and the water will stagnate. The engineers use a mix of mathematics, observation, and a healthy dose of trial and error. There are stories of aqueducts that missed their mark by a few feet, requiring last-minute adjustments and, no doubt, a few creative explanations to the city officials. Odd facts and small wonders abound. Did you know that Roman aqueducts often included inspection shafts, vertical tunnels that allowed workers to climb down and clear out debris? or that some aqueducts ran for dozens of miles, crossing valleys on soaring arches and tunneling through hills with nothing but hand tools and determination. In some places, the water was carried in lead pipes, a choice that would raise eyebrows today, but was considered the height of technology at the time. If you've ever been impressed by a modern plumbing system, you're standing on the shoulders of Roman giants, though hopefully with a little less lead. As the sun climbs higher, the worksite hums with activity. The trench stretches across the fields, the first stones are set, and the promise of water draws closer with every hour. The day is just beginning, and the story of the Roman aqueduct is waiting to flow. One drop, one stone, one careful measurement at a time. By midday, the worksite is alive with the full chorus of construction. The air is thick with the scent of sun, warmed stone, fresh mortar, and the occasional whiff of olive oil from a laborer's lunch. The soundscape is a symphony of hammers tapping, chisels scraping, and the low, rhythmic chant of workers passing stones hand to hand. The aqueduct's trench now snakes across the countryside, its walls rising steadily, each block set with a precision that would make even the most meticulous modern engineer nod in approval. The masons are joined by a host of other specialists. Carpenters build wooden scaffolds and frames, their saws and mallets echoing across the fields. Surveyors check and recheck the gradient, using their trusty chorobates and groma, ancient tools that look suspiciously like something you'd find in a particularly ambitious game of lawn darts. The water must flow at just the right angle, too steep, and it rushes dangerously, too shallow, and it might as well be a Roman puddle. Let's pause at a section where the aqueduct must cross a deep valley. Here, the Romans show off their flair for the dramatic and the practical. Instead of following the land's dips and rises, they build a series of soaring arches, each one a marvel of balance and strength. The scaffolding rises like a wooden forest, and the masons work high above the ground, their sandals gripping the beams, their nerves perhaps tested more than they'd care to admit. There's a running joke that the best way to cure a fear of heights is to spend a week building an aqueduct. If you're still afraid after that, at least you'll have a great view. The arches themselves are a lesson in teamwork. Each stone is shaped to fit its neighbors, and the keystone, the final central piece, locks the whole structure in place. When the keystone is set, there's often a small celebration, a cheer, a shared cup of wine, and maybe a wager on whose arch will last the longest. Some arches from Roman times are still standing today, which means someone, somewhere, is still winning that bet. Further along, the aqueduct must tunnel through a low hill. Here, the work is slow and painstaking. Miners chip away at the rock by lamplight, the air cool and close. The only sounds the steady tap of iron on stone and the occasional muttered complaint about the foreman's sense of direction. Tunnels are dug from both sides, and when the two teams finally meet in the middle, there's a moment of triumph. And, if the alignment is off, a moment of creative problem solving. If you've ever tried to hang a picture and ended up with 2 holes in the wall, you'll appreciate the challenge. The aqueduct is more than just a channel for water. It's a living artery, drawing people and activity in its wake. Along the route, small villages spring up, clusters of tents and huts where workers live, eat, and share stories. Merchants arrive to sell bread, cheese, and the ever-popular garum, a fermented fish sauce that, according to some, could cure anything except a bad mood. Children play in the shadow of the arches, their laughter mingling with the calls of street vendors and the braying of donkeys. Women play a vital role here too. Some bring food and water to the workers, others tend small gardens or run makeshift shops. In the evenings, families gather around fires, sharing news from home and tales of the day's work. There's a sense of community, a feeling that everyone, no matter their station, has a part to play in this grand endeavor. Odd facts and small wonders are everywhere. Did you know that Roman engineers sometimes used waterproof concrete made with volcanic ash to line the channels and prevent leaks? Or that they built settling tanks along the road, where silt and debris could collect before the water continued on its way. These tanks were cleaned regularly, a job that fell to the unlucky but essential: a quarry. The ancient world's answer to the modern pool boy, though with less sunscreen and more togas. The aqueduct's progress is marked by milestones, literally. Stone markers are set along the route, inscribed with the names of emperors, engineers, and the occasional boast about the project's speed or cost. Some markers survive to this day, their Latin inscriptions weathered, but still legible, a reminder that even in the age of marble and mosaic, a little self-promotion never hurt. As the afternoon wears on, the sun casts long shadows across the arches and channels. The workers pause for a meal: bread, olives, maybe a bit of dried fruit, eaten in the shade of the very stones they've set. There's talk of home, of the city, of the day when the first water will flow and the fountains of Rome will sing with new life. The aqueduct is still far from finished, but each day brings it closer, each stone a step on the journey from spring to city. The work will continue until the light fades and the promise of water draws ever nearer. But for now, there is a sense of quiet satisfaction, a feeling that, for all its challenges, this is a labor worth doing, a story worth telling, and a marvel that will shape the world for generations to come. As the aqueduct approaches the city, the landscape changes. The countryside gives way to clusters of villas, gardens, and the first hints of urban bustle. The channel, once a humble trench, now rides high on elegant arches, its stonework gleaming in the late afternoon sun. The workers' pace quickens, spurred on by the nearness of their goal and the promise of celebration. There's a sense of pride in every step, a feeling that they are not just building for today, but for centuries to come. The final approach to Rome is a spectacle in itself. The aqueduct must cross roads, rivers, and even other aqueducts, sometimes stacking one channel atop another in a feat of engineering bravado that would make even the most seasoned modern architect pause. The city's gates are abuzz with excitement. Children run ahead, eager to see the first trickle of water, while merchants and officials gather to witness the moment when the aqueduct is joined to the city's network. Let's pause at the great terminus, where the water enters Rome. Here, the aqueduct empties into a castellum, a grand settling tank and distribution hub, often adorned with statues and inscriptions. The water is divided into channels, each one destined for a different part of the city. Public fountains, bathhouses, private homes, and even the emperor's palace. The arrival of fresh, clean water is cause for celebration. There are speeches, offerings to the gods, and, if the foreman has anything to say about it, a well-earned feast for the workers. If you've ever attended a ribbon-cutting ceremony and thought, "This could use more togas," you're in the right place. The impact on daily life is immediate and profound. Public fountains spring to life, their basins filled with cool, clear water. Women gather to fill their jugs. Children splash and play, and the city's stray dogs discover a new favorite spot for a drink. The bathhouses, once limited by the whims of wells and rain, now offer hot and cold baths to all comers, rich and poor, citizen and visitor alike. The baths become the social heart of the city, a place for gossip, business, and the occasional philosophical debate about whether it's better to bathe before or after lunch. Odd facts and small wonders flow through every street. Did you know that some Roman homes had indoor plumbing, with lead or terracotta pipes bringing water right to the kitchen or garden? Or that the city's sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima, was flushed clean by aqueduct water, keeping the streets relatively fresh and the neighbors mostly happy. There are stories of clever engineers who devised water-powered mills, fountains that played music, and even a few practical jokes involving redirected pipes and unsuspecting guests. If you've ever been startled by a rogue garden sprinkler, you're in good company. The aqueduct also brings challenges. Maintenance is a constant task. Sediment must be cleared, leaks patched, and the occasional enterprising citizen discouraged from tapping into the flow for a private vineyard. Teams of equari, the water workers, patrol the channels, armed with tools, torches, and a healthy skepticism of anyone loitering near a suspiciously lush patch of grass. The city's magistrates keep careful records, tracking every drop and every denarius spent. There are even laws against water theft, a crime that, in a city as thirsty as Rome, is taken very seriously indeed. Let's not forget the people whose lives are changed by the aqueduct's arrival. The washerwomen who no longer have to trek to distant streams, the bakers whose bread rises higher with better water, the gardeners whose plots bloom with new abundance. The aqueduct is more than stone and mortar. It's a promise kept, a dream made real, and a quiet revolution in the rhythm of daily life. As night falls, the city glows with lanterns and the soft murmur of flowing water. The fountains sparkle in the moonlight, their spray catching the breeze and cooling the air. The workers gather for one last look at their creation, their faces lit by pride and the knowledge that their labor will outlast them all. The aqueduct, silent and steady, carries its gift through the sleeping city, a thread of life woven into the fabric of Rome. The story of the Roman aqueduct is a story of vision, persistence, and the belief that even the most ordinary needs, water to drink, to wash, to grow, can inspire extraordinary achievements. It's a reminder that the greatest wonders are often those that flow quietly, day after day, beneath our feet. And that, my dear friends, is where we will end tonight's story. Good night.